this new stream with Team Liquid, where we came up with weaknesses for all three players. And then, of course, we came up with the weaknesses for the entire team and the strengths for the entire team. And overall, they're a very solid team. But, for example, when we look at their weaknesses, a lot of Liquid's weaknesses are actually more on the adaptability side of things. And that can cause them to be a little bit inconsistent because they don't have a consistent way of adapting to unorthodox plays. So demo games normally do really well against Team Liquid. Whereas if we look at, say, a Chronic's individual stuff as second man, he doesn't really support his teammates really well. He's too far away from the play. A Tau tends to react to the play rather than reading it. And then Oski sometimes just goes for balls he's completely getting beat to. I mean, it's just something you notice about something we found out about all three players. We came up with weaknesses and came up with strength. We did the same thing for G2, Falcons, Crew Esports, and then yesterday we went over Pioneers. And honestly, it's really fun to see like what teams have the most weakness, because when you look at the RLCS major, it's not necessarily the best teams or the teams with the highest ceiling that are going to be winning a major. It's normally, if your team has less weaknesses than your opponents, then you're most likely going to win. And this can even be brought back to all the former majors. There's a few rare instances where a team that had more weaknesses has actually been able to win. So we can we can even look at the fall major. We can look at the fall major we can look at the fall major, look at these teams, look how the matches go. Version 1 and Quadrant. Version 1 have way less weaknesses than Quadrant. Gen G, less weaknesses than Power. And at least on European lands, we can see that at least on European lands, G2 individually are even worse than they normally are. So them losing to a Game 5 to Oxygen makes sense. At European lands, G2 tend to have more weaknesses than not. Rotationally, they still look solid, but they weren't hitting their shots. Club versus KCP. Club had far less weaknesses. Space Station, far less weaknesses than Falcons. And Carmine Core, of course, they're going to win that one. And FaZe honestly do have a lot of weaknesses, especially, and Moist, at least this roster, didn't have a lot of weaknesses as well. Now, this Moist roster didn't have as high of a ceiling as the old one, of course, but no matter what, Moist always going to have a lot less weaknesses than other teams. And then Liquid, they showed up. I think Liquid are one of the few teams where where they can kind of play above where their weaknesses are because of how good individually they are. And Gen G, at least in this match right here, Oxygen, they are playing with confidence. Gen G had some more weaknesses than Oxygen. Oxygen, honestly, as a team on LAN, are a very confident team, and Oxygen are probably one of those few teams that if you play a match with Oxygen, you can't compare weaknesses of the two teams, because Oxygen do have a lot of weaknesses, but they still end up winning some of their matches. Version 1, they have a lot less weaknesses than other teams, like we said, Moist, Carmine Core. Falcons normally have a really high floor. G2 on European lands, they just have a really low floor. And then Secret, they have a low Quadrant have a lot of weaknesses as well, which we've talked about before. KCP at this land definitely had a lot of weaknesses. But yeah, like there's only a few teams where you can't really look at weaknesses of a team. FaZe is normally one of those teams. Like we talked about, Oxygen is one of those teams where you can't really look at weaknesses. And yeah, Liquid are also normally one of those teams where you can't really look at weaknesses, because for Power honestly didn't have a lot of weaknesses, but sometimes their offense can kind of be easily held down. That's why a team like Liquid or Version 1 was able to deal with them, at least, well, for Liquid in the first two games, and then for Version 1 in a complete on perfect sweep. Something you do have to notice. That's why when we're doing all these notes, because at a major LAN, normally it's the weaknesses that determine a team. If you have more than another team, you're most likely going to lose. The only exceptions being Team Liquid, FaZe, and Oxygen. But even then, those weaknesses can still show up. But here we go. So everybody, we're going to be going over Team Dignitas today. Here are our initial predictions from before we did any analyzing. Here's one of my initial predictions. Right here we had Dignitas narrowly. I have Dignitas narrowly beating Vitality in the first round. Alpha 54 has never had a great start to LANs, and of course he is playing with two LAN rookies. Evo is actually not a LAN rookie, and he's actually a 1v1 LAN. He's actually played in a 1v1 LAN, the only 1v1 LAN to ever exist, and I believe he actually did really well. I think it's called Turf Wars, I think was the LAN. Yeah, so he ends up beating Evo. Yeah, he ended up beating Evo. And then he ended up losing to AJ in some high-scoring games. And then he ended up losing to Zapatos, but Zapatos was doing really well. Zapatos almost made top 3 at this event. He ended up getting reverse swept by Raise Bull, sadly. But Evo, he's been at the only 1v1 LAN. He's done fairly well. He has one series win on a LAN, so that does show something. And it's against Raise Bull. Raise Bull was one game away from making the grand final, so that is something we have to keep in mind about LANs, is Evo does actually have experience. And then Vitality, Sizen, and Radosin, I don't know if they have any LAN experience. I don't know if they've had a 2v2. I know Europe's had some 2v2 LANs, possibly. I mean, I'm sure we can just we can check relatively quickly here. Complete list result. I don't know if it'll say if it's an offline event or not. I know it says if I click on it or not, but yeah, I'm not seeing anything that's a LAN for Radosin. Same with Sizen as well. Sizen and Radosin team up during RLCSX, I believe. They were on, yeah, Team Atlantide Wade. They've actually had some really good RLCS runs throughout their career, as a matter of fact. So it's great to see. I mean, we see back in RLCSX, they ended up going to, they got top 8. I believe they got a 4th place at some point, or they almost got a 4th place. At the Community Open here, they got 2nd. They ended up beating... They lost to German Amigos, but then they beat BS Plus Competition, another team. They ended up beating Guild, Endpoint, and German Amigos. So if that doesn't show you how solid they are, I mean, I don't know what will. But there we go. That's enough about Vitality, though. We're going to be talking about Dignitas today. Tomorrow, we are actually, I believe tomorrow we're going to be going over Vitality. I did say we're going over the 5th seed. Oh, no, G1 are the 5th seed. So we're finally going to be going over G1 tomorrow. Yeah, here we go. We're going over G1. All right. So, without further ado, I think it's time to get into looking at Dignitas. So, we, of course, want to look at Dignitas in the group stage, just as we have with every other team. When we look at the group stage, we're going to be able to find out what, in the least nerve-wracking part of the tournament, except for normally the first series in the tournament's the most nerve-wracking. But, for example, Dignitas ended up winning their first series, and we can even see right here, FaZe, the only game they lost, series they lost was against Optic here in the first round of the tournament. Viria and Space Station had a close game. Version 1 almost lost to NRG. So that just goes to show you, normally the first round, I mean, even PK getting swept by M80. Looking at, I mean, G1 lost the first game to Ghost. I mean, normally the first round tends to be the more nerve-wracking one. And even Complexity versus Accelerate was still, like, outside game 2. I mean, it was a close series. But here we go. Let's look at Dignitas. Let's see what series we have. So they end up losing game 5 to Shopify Rebellion. So I think that's something that we can do, is we can look at, so of course in this event, Dignitas, they didn't make it to the semis or anything like that. They've made one top 4 this event. They beat Space Station to do so, which they beat Space Station to make it to the quarterfinals here as well. So we're going to look at probably one game from Shopify. We'll look at one game of them versus Gen G, and then we'll look at Space Station and Complexity. All right. Because honestly, if we look at this, I watched this game 5 live, and the nerves for Dignitas were insane. All right, but without further ado, let's get into it. Where's the replays? There they are. And everybody, before we get for YouTube viewers, if you've been watching all the videos, you pretty much know what we're going over by now. Whenever I'm analyzing professional Rocket League, I'm keeping in mind just a couple things, and those couple things are what dictate what the biggest issues of teams are. So here we go. Hopefully it's sorted out. Awesome, it's sorted. Dignitas versus Shopify. So we can actually look at the stats for the entire series rather than just games. But here we go. So in Rocket League, while we're analyzing everybody today, and I want everyone else to pay attention as well, because if you do, that means you'll be able to help me analyze as well. So when we're playing high-level Rocket League, we're keeping in mind 2 things. We're keeping in mind possession We're keeping in mind possession, and we're keeping in mind the 3 necessary areas of the pitch. There we go. 3 necessary areas of the pitch. So, what is possession? Well, first of all, why is what we're going to be looking at how teams take possession and how well they do it. So, possession, though, at its basic core, is a necessary part of Rocket League. In order to score a goal, you literally need the ball to score, correct? So you think, okay, logically it makes sense. There's no reason to ever give away the ball just to try and gain it back. That's the main big point of Rocket League, which if teams don't do this, you're just giving away the ball for free. And if you look at professional Rocket League is in a spot where teams are fighting for possession no matter what. So if a team gives away that possession for free, then of course that you're just essentially you're giving space to the other team. You're giving the ball to the other team for them to do what they want, and you have to refight to gain that possession. So that's why you want to keep possession as long as possible. Some people tend to have a counter for that. Normally the counter being, well, what if you have 0 boost? Well, even if you have 0 boost, you can still lose a 50 to your teammate and maintain that possession. And even with 0 boost, sometimes you can win a 50 and keep possession and keep going without getting bumped. I mean, it's a lot rare in that instance because normally the person challenging you has boost and can recover, or this guy will just insta-challenge after you win the 50. But either way, you can still maintain possession even with 0 boost, whether you lose a 50 or take it yourself. And another idea to keep in mind is, well, what if my teammate doesn't have boost? Well, that means he just failed to do his job. And especially at the pro level, if you can't grab pads on your way to position, then you are just not going to be at the top of the region. It's that simple. So that's why we're going to be looking at possession as being one thing for these replay reviews. And another one, we're going to be looking at the 3 necessary areas of the pitch. Now, what are the 3 necessary areas of the pitch? Well, of course, if you've watched over the last couple of days, they are ball guy. We need someone on the ball, right? Next, we need someone supporting. We need support. We need someone to fill in that support area. And then, lastly, we need someone to fill in off-ball pressure. All 3 areas of the field here are necessary, right? If you have no one on the ball, then of course no one's taking possession or trying to fight for possession. If no one's supporting, then the person who's trying to get the ball or trying to keep the ball has no support. He needs that support player. And the reason why we support from behind, we've talked about it before. And when we support from behind, we're able to see more of the pitch. We can see if the midfield's open. And if the midfield's open, we can go there for a pass, right? But even if the pass doesn't come, we can fill in right behind. So that's how we're able to cover support with 1 player, ball with 1 player. And we also have our off-ball pressure guy. Without off-ball pressure, we can think of Rocket League as if we don't have off-ball pressure, it means essentially whenever our 3rd man's in front of the ball, he instantly rotates out, right? Another way of phrasing this is we only control this part of the field, right? So essentially, if we have no off-ball pressure, we're giving more than 2/3 of the field to the other team for them to do whatever the heck they want. And phrasing it this way, would you want to give G2 Esports 2/3 of the field to do whatever they want? Probably not, right? Would you want to give even a team like Power? They didn't make this major, but would you still want to give Power 2/3 of the field to do whatever they want? Probably not. Would you want to give just players like First Killer or Daniel or Joria's 2/3 of the field to do whatever they want? Probably not, right? So that's why off-ball pressure becomes a necessary part of Rocket League that needs to be covered. And that's also, even more importantly, why support needs to be able to be maximized as an individual. When you start from close from behind facing forward, your ball cam can see more of the field. You can see if the midfield's open. If the midfield's covered, just cover the 50. But if it's not covered, you can go there for a pass. But if you see your teammate's not going to pass it, go right back in behind, and you see 1 player is covering both areas of support, whereas most people think Rocket League is like this, where you need someone covering the 50 and someone covering the pass. But the main issue with this is no off-ball pressure. Correct. So now looking at this, you're like, well, can't he go for a demo? No, in reality, he can't, because think about it this way. In Rocket League, there's something called flow, which is your own team's ability to keep momentum. So if you're going into your teammate's flow and with the flow of your opponents, which would be the case here, you are essentially making it a 4-on-2 in terms of cars that your teammates have to get through. You might get in their way, but also, if you're going in the same direction as your opponents, it's way easier for them to avoid demos as well, correct? So looking at it like that, we want to make sure that, well, second man in this situation would only be useful if a pass comes to him. But in Rocket League, because if we look at a sphere of influence of a Rocket League player, because of momentum, it's already going to be way harder in front of him. But also because of boost, the cone of influence in players are really important. So if we limit second man to just being available for a pass, that is a very big limiting thing. So might as well have the second man be behind, third man apply off-ball pressure, and really increase our sphere of influence here. Because from here we can see the whole pitch, so we're covering the pass and the 50, which is maximizing our individual skill there. But, of course, thank you, and of course, hopefully on YouTube I put something like skip to here if you've already heard the explanation, but at least for Twitch, we now know what we're going to be using to analyze pro teams. So now, let's get into watching some pro gameplay. So the first thing I like to do is I like to look at the stats from the pro teams. And right off the bat, one thing we're looking for is demos. NA teams tend to have a good idea about getting at least some demos. Drees, of course, is the highest, most experience, and he has the most amount of demos. Andy also has a good amount of experience. He's the second amount, and actually one of the lowest demos is Evo, so something to keep in mind. But also we have to look at avoiding demos. Andy is horrible at avoiding demos, according to this series, whereas Drees is apparently just the greatest off-ball pressure guy of all time. Do you do twos coaching? Yes, I do twos coaching. If you do exclamation mark coaching, you can see how you can just contact me. Or if you do exclamation mark Discord, if you join the Havoc Esports Discord and you become a Havoc Esports subscriber, you get, I believe for tier 3, you get, yeah, here we go, right here. So for tier 3, you get 12 coaching sessions with me as an RLCS coach. And even if you don't, and that's for $5 a month. But even if you can't afford that, or it's $2.99, $3.99, where you'll still get coaching with some of our other trained coaches, and I train the coaches myself for the most part. So that's all stuff that you can be able to do. So exclamation mark coaching, or join our Havoc Discord by doing exclamation mark Discord. But here we go. Position it, and let's look at the boost. Average boost, I want to look at that. So Andy, relatively well on the boost side of things. Drees as well. And Evo, actually on the low side. Evo's boost management looking very similar to that of KCP, actually. And Drees, he is a big pad player. And a small pad player. Okay, Drees is grabbing everything, on average. And then Evo, he's a bad player. Actually, looking at these, all three players actually relatively well on the side of, boost. Let's look at the speed side of things. Drees, Evo. Andy is actually relatively slow compared to other pros, but still at a good, okay spot. We're going to look at the ground percentage here. And actually, this is normally a stat that you want to see higher for players, because if players aren't on the ground, that normally means they're pre-jumping stuff that they're most likely getting beat to, which you don't want to see. So, looking at that, we want to see why Evo and Drees tend to be a little bit more in the air. Now, Evo's not the end of the world, but Drees being under 50%, that's rare for a pro player. So, without further ado, let's get into looking at this. So, looking at the series here, what game would probably be the best to look at? Probably game 3 would be the best to look at. They won that in overtime. So that's what we'll look at. Game 3. Looks like Evo ended up being MVP here. Alright, finally, gonna be looking at Dignitas here. We all know what we're looking at here. Oh. Settings, video. Alright, normally I do this before the stream, but I forgot. Here we go. Alright. So like we talked about, we're going to be looking at how Dignitas handles possession, as well as the 3 areas of the pitch. Let's see. So right off the bat, oh, here we go. This is actually really good from Evo. We can tell Evo is actively reading, or at least trying to read where this ball's going. You see that ball's bouncing out mid, and then he's able to put a good shot on target. Could have even been better. Maybe could have faked out his opponent. But right off the bat, what are we seeing from... Apparently I didn't click apply. There we go. So right here, if we look at Dignitas, they're already trying to do the 3 areas of the pitch. We have a ball guy, we have a support guy, and well, there's no sense for Drees to cut up the field, right? Because just like we talked about, going with the flow of our opponents and against the flow of our teammates. So we don't want to do that. So Drees, instead, what he's going to do is he's going to fill in behind. Eo's going to fill in behind Andy. Andy, of course, going for the ball. And then once the ball gets hit past Evo, if Andy has momentum or boost, he should be able to rotate through looking for off-ball pressure. And that's how we have the 3 areas of the field being covered. Off-ball pressure, ball guy, and support guy, once that does indeed happen. Which if you look, Andy, I think Andy did have low boost or momentum. If we look, yeah, he had 50 boost. Actually, he had less than that. He picked up a mini pad, so this makes sense. He couldn't really go for a demo. So that's why he ends up rotating out. But even with that in mind, we're still filling in the 3 areas of the pitch now, right? So now Drees is going for the ball. Andy's going to fill in second, and now Evo's going to apply off-ball pressure. So it looks like Dignitas, right off the bat, are looking relatively solid. Although where I expect we'll be seeing a majority of the mistakes will be either from nerves or will be from individual stuff. So we do notice Andy stuck in here with net with 0 boost. This is one of those issues with flow of rotation that you want. Because if you have 0 boost, I guess he landed a turtle. I didn't recognize that before, but if you have 0 boost, normally applying off-ball pressure tends to take a little bit extra time out of it, so you're not really being as useful as you could be. Could you take your possession here, Andy? Yeah, you definitely could have, but I'll give it a one-time mistake here. Andy's normally really good at possession. So it does look like Andy as a player right out the bat, he doesn't really know where the ball's going. He's kind of like assuming where the ball's going to go and doesn't know exactly where the ball's going to go. And we talked about it for a lot of different players over the last couple of days. We talked about it for, at least for yesterday, we talked about it for Hunter. The day before, we talked about it for all 3 players from Crew Esports. We talked about it for Ahmad on Falcons. And we even talked about it for Atal on Liquid. And it's the whole idea of reading the play rather than reacting to the play. And looking at this right here, we can tell just by how Andy's positioning, he does not know what's going to happen with the ball here. Because for me, Evo's taking possession. So right now, I would be turning to face the play, give support for my teammate immediately because I saw he has a free possession. And even right here, I see that he's getting the beat on somebody. And I can continue to face here. 2 pieces are going to hit that ball a little bit out. This should be an opportunity to take a free possession. Now, Andy does eventually get to this ball, but Rocket League is about maximizing opportunities. And since he wasn't supported this entire time, if Drees ended up going for, if Evo ended up going for a 50 here, he wouldn't have been reading it. He's just reacting to it. As you can see, this is why he's staying so far away from the play. He's trying to get to a spot where he can react to how the ball's going to go. Now, luckily, it does look like he has some of the ideas of reading the play in here because he wasn't afraid of 2-piece banging this ball over him. But at the same time, that's why we always have to make sure like these players understand the idea of reading versus reacting to the play. Now he fills in second for Evo. Drees ends up cutting to fill in off-ball pressure, and that ends up being a really good goal. So I do want to look at this from Drees' POV because this could be okay. So right here, Drees kind of just watching the ball. That's what I don't like about Drees here. Let's see. What does Drees end up doing? He goes for the big boost. And Drees is kind of rushing back. That's the first issue that I have. Now, eventually, he does turn up the pitch to apply off-ball pressure. But what I don't like is right here, he's doing nothing to the play. He's not applying off-ball pressure. And when we look at Rocket League, we have a ball guy here in Evo. We have a support guy here in Andy, meaning we need to have the off-ball pressure. And normally, what it means by off-ball pressure is looking for a demo. Drees can't get a demo on 2-piece here. But if he took his time rotating back, he'd be able to demo or try to demo memory on the rotation back. And even if Evo gets possession the same way, he can still turn up field to apply off-ball pressure here, but he would have actually done so in a much better position to go for the off-ball pressure here. But instead, since he rotates so far out doing nothing, now he has to turn up the field with Evo already counterattacking, and now he has to try and get the demo. Now luckily for Dignitas, they were able to get it, as we can see from here. Actually, he doesn't even get the demo on memory. Evo actually has to get the beat on him, but he does get the demo on part. But even then, if Drees had rotated further back here, Evo would have had an even more free ball. Because if Drees took his time rotating back, he would have demoed memory by the time before net memory would have even tried to jump here. Because here we can actually go in the air. We can unpause. We can grab the boost here and then start cutting mid, demo memory, and that's a free ball for Evo. And then you could go to demo Parth, and then maybe turn to demo memory if he spawns on this side again, and that would have been a goal for Evo either way. Now, were they able to get the goal? Yeah, they were able to get the goal, but it wasn't the most optimal way possible. And when you're playing in Rocket League, you need to think about optimizing as much as you can, as efficiently as you can. Why is Drees flying through the ball here? So then I'm confused about this part. So he sees Evo taking possession. So it looks like when it comes to reading the play, a couple of Dignitas players have the issue. So I want to stick to, because we've seen it with Andy, we've seen it with Drees. Let's try to see it here with Evo. Or hopefully we won't see it. If Evo ends up actually reading the play really well, then that'll be great. So right here. Great read on that one. He takes possession. Actually gets a double reset as well. Now, how does he fill in? So he does go all the way back for boost. This time, it's not the end of the world because he's in. That's the one thing you notice about Evo. He's actively reading the play here, and it's something that you're not expecting. But because I'm sure you said, like, when I said names like Ahmad or Hunter, Olive Crew Esports, or Atal, you're expecting it to be a player like Drees who's actively reading the play. But as you can see by all those bigger names, it's actually Evo who, instead of it being one of the veterans that are reading the play, it's actually one of the new players in the Rocket League scene. And honestly, I followed Evo a bit. I thought he was very mechanical. I thought he was very fast. But it does seem like Nyx helped him out a lot with the rotational side of things, and Evo, just as a player, is actively reading the ball a lot of the time. Because you have to remember, Evo at least was beating some top players in ones, whereas Drees, he wasn't. He was okay. He was good in North America. Don't get me wrong, but he wasn't beating the top players. I mean, he got pretty much beat easily by some of the top players in North America multiple times in a row. But Evo, he's honestly a very individually smart player, and I think that's something that people haven't noticed. Maybe his rotations when he was on Xset were poor, but it looks like Nick has actually helped him out a lot on the rotational side of things. Now, that was a great pass, but I want to see this from Drees' POV. So Drees kind of just works out for Drees here. Rotationally, one thing we're noticing here is once Andy gets in front of the ball here, Evo does not have a support player. Now, luckily, Drees manages to get in a spot where he is supporting Evo, but for example, that could have been easily a counterattack against Dignitas here, because Drees is not supporting in a really good spot. Like we talked about before, when we talk about support, we want support to be going in behind your teammate, because from here you can actually see the entire pitch because your ball cam is behind your teammates. But two, you can still go mid for a pass, which Drees, if he's reading the play properly, he sees Andy going for a demo, Evo going up for the ball right here, Drees could easily fill in for a pass down here and an even better opportunity for a shot. But since he's coming across like this, it means if Evo doesn't get a perfect pass or he ends up getting beat, there's no support player here. And then Dignitas are just going to get counterattacked. And I'm sure once we look at them against Complexity, we'll really be seeing issues with a rotation like this from Drees. Because honestly, Evo, he's supporting from behind for the most part. And Drees, when he was on G2, he was supporting from behind for the most part. Now, I'm gonna say that's just maybe a one-time thing from Drees. But if it happens again, of course, we will have to put that down on the notes as a consistent issue. Because the thing about pros is if they make a mistake more than 2 times in less than 3 games, normally that means it's an actual consistent issue for pros. Misread from Drees. Like right here, he's facing the play, but then he automatically turns away, which if... I could say maybe it was a mess up on the read from him, I guess. But there we go. Evo, again, this is why Evo is so good. Now, we talked about over the last couple of days, when you're forcing, you only want to force early if you know 100% you're going to get that ball. But right here, Evo, he 50s that ball. And to be honest, it does end up being a good thing for the other team. But we can definitely see here, Evo is reading the play, but it's more of, now they have to fine-tune Evo's gameplay to know, like, hey, if you jump too early, your challenge is going to end up useless here. Because when we are forcing in Rocket League, we want to force when it becomes threatening, for one. And when does it be threatening? When they're actually able to get a shot. So normally top of the goal box is a threatening spot, right? If they're air dribbling from this part of the field, it's still not threatening. They're dribbling from this part of the field, definitely. Doesn't matter who it is. It could be a bronze, it could be Zen, it could be First Killer. It doesn't become... They can air dribble the entire time, but it only becomes threatening once the air dribble finally gets to here. That's when it needs to be forced high, because now it's a threatening shot. As we can see, Evo was able to get the touch, but what did it do for Dignitas? It didn't do anything, right? All it did was just get a 50-50, which set up Shopify Rebellion here. That's why looking at this play from Dignitas, we want to look at it and say, okay, well, Dignitas are looking solid, but Evo, he has to make sure he jumps when it's threatening, because otherwise the other team is good. Or if Evo believes he can challenge us and maintain possession 100%, then I'm still fine with him going. But you have to realize, if you challenge when it's not threatening, you have to get that ball. Otherwise, your challenge is going to be useless, and it's up to your teammates to save you. So that's something we do have to keep in mind. As we can see here from this play, since he did force early, rather than before it became threatening, it allows Memory to easily lose a 50 and 2-piece. Honestly, could have scored that if Drees didn't cover him. Now, this is still a really good read from Drees, don't get me wrong. Drees got the big boost. He sees the ball's going out the backboard, and he gets a great read on that ball. But yeah, it does seem like Drees and Evo, at least for the most part, are reading the play really well. Drees and Evo both. So let's go back to Andy and see if it is a recurring issue from Andy. Is Andy reacting to the play rather than reading the play? And with a miss like that, it would definitely seem so. Yeah, if we look, he had no idea where this ball was going. This entire time, he has no idea, because of course, I see Memory pinching that, and even I see the ball bouncing off a 2-piece. But as you see, Andy, he just had no idea where the ball was going that entire time. That should be a free save for Andy every day of the week. So I think we have found our first individual issue for Dignitas, and it's an Andy. Andy has issues with reading the play. So here we go. We can actually copy and paste Hunter's issue here, because it's the exact same thing. He tends to react to where the ball is going instead of reading where it is going. This causes him to be slower to some balls compared to opponents who do read the play. So we can end up writing that down for Andy. There we go. That's our first individual issue that we know Andy has been doing. And if Andy's done it multiple times in this game, he's going to be doing it for the rest of the tournament. It's just a matter of fact. But now what I really want to look at are the rotations of Drees, since we saw a missed rotation from him before. Or actually, we've seen a couple from him now. If we see one more, rotations are definitely a struggle for Drees, at least on this team. And then for Evo, we have to see if he continues to try and force high, or aka when it's not threatening. Evo believed he had a save on that backboard read, that's why he went over and in off the goal, but I would say that's more of a mechanical issue. At the end of the day, maybe, in terms of, we could say here that, actually, let's look at Evo. If he has low boost, okay, so he has enough boost here. He sees the ball's getting hit past. He sees 2 pieces there. Yeah, he's on low boost here, so I think that's why he goes for the save. So that's understandable. So, like we said, like, just because a player messes up doesn't mean that's not understandable or something that he can't work on. I think right there, maybe he could have grabbed a little bit more pads, but I wouldn't say that it's his fault. Andy could have done a little bit better with that play. All right, Drees. Gonna... Oh, I really don't like this. He does get the ball, don't get me wrong, but then he gets a 50, and we're back on defense. So this is actually an issue a lot of lower ranked players have. So for those of you who might be SSL but still rank B and 6-mans type of thing, it's something that a lot of mechanical players actually have an issue with. Because right here, Drees, it looks like he's reading the play. He reads this 50-50, he takes possession for himself, and you're thinking like, well, now it just means Dignitas have to make sure there's a support player here, right? Well, true, but if you notice, since Evo had to cut in and he's going so fast, that means Andy, who may have wanted to support Drees on this play, he couldn't, since the ball's been taken off him. Now, Evo's rushing from last man back all the way to cover second, since Andy's now out of the play. And if we look, Evo ends up having to turn out because Drees ends up not even be able to get a good 50 as well. So that's why cuts like this from Drees tend to not to be the best idea. So I'm sure the follow-up question would be like, well, what would be better here? What would be better here is let Andy continue to take possession and let Evo support, and since we have the ball, Drees just filling behind for now. Eventually, Andy's going to lose that 50 back, and then he'll be the off-ball pressure guy for Evo's ball guy, and then you will be support for them, right? Because since Drees cuts up field here, if Andy loses that 50-50, for example, and it goes back to Evo, Evo has no support player, right? So that's another reason why we don't want whoever's third to cut all the way back upfield in a situation like that. So I think we've cemented Drees' rotations as being an issue, but we haven't been able to fine-tune it yet. So before we write down Drees' issues, let's look at him just a little bit longer. Because it does seem like he knows there should be a ball guy, support guy, and off-ball pressure guy, but I think he doesn't know how to fill in those positions as optimally as possible. I think that's the big thing that we're noticing from, because even right here, Drees, again, he cuts into second here when his teammates are in perfectly okay positions. And this also means, because right here, he is the third man. We should be seeing, he needs to be watching the middle, applying off-ball pressure to the other team. Because off-ball pressure is not just for offense, it's for defense as well. When you're rotating back, you want to apply demos. You want to make sure the other team doesn't have any space to think without any issues. That's why we want Drees watching mid here. And if he was watching mid, of course, Andy would be supporting Evo. Evo would be on the ball, and Drees would be watching mid. And, like, even if Andy gets bumped, Drees can still fill in that position. It just, right, when he did cut in, he cut in when Andy wasn't getting bumped. He cut in right here when there were no issues. Now, if he was watching mid, looking for demos, applying off-ball pressure, and then he sees Andy get bumped and he wants to fill in support for Evo, that's fine. But even then, reading the play, we can see it's not really that scary of an issue. Andy could probably go here and he could just fill in support for Andy in that situation. So I think we are starting to see Drees cuts into rotation a little bit too much. He doesn't know how to optimally fill rotation. Now, I can definitely see he knows that he definitely knows that there needs to be a ball guy, support guy, and off-ball pressure guy. But it seems like since he wants to cut into the rotation too much, there ends up being no off-ball pressure guy when he's third man. And he slows down the rotation of his teammates, which we're starting to notice here is actually very similar to Banana Head. Banana Head tend to cut into the play unnecessarily, which slows down his teammates, such the flow of the rotation. And when nervous, he tends to rush possessive touches and even more necessary cuts and rotation. So this is almost the exact same thing we can write here for Drees. So I'll write it down here for Drees. But for example, it slows down his teammates, but when nervous, he doesn't rush his touches. He actually still has good first touches. When nervous, he turns into even more unnecessary cuts in rotation. AKA, he rushes into position a lot, which tends to leave Dignitas on defense without an off-ball pressure position. There we go. So we're starting to really narrow out these issues. We're seeing Drees here. We have found his rotational issue. And for Andy, we have found his issue. He tends to react to the play rather than reading it. So now let's look at Evo. Let's look at Evo here. And see if there's anything we can pick out for Evo. We did notice earlier he jumped a little early for a ball that he probably shouldn't have. But let's see how he managed to handle his positioning. So I want him to support Andy here. So he is supporting Andy. Drees does watch mid there. So luckily that time he didn't panic and rush back. Here we go. Evo trying to apply some off-ball pressure. Ooh, he does leave off-ball pressure. It's starting to look like maybe Dignitas don't understand the importance of off-ball pressure on defense. On offense, I think it's part of their game plan. On offense, they're applying off-ball pressure on the offensive end of things. But when we're looking at defense, we're not noticing really. Look, because right here from Evo, he's rushing back. We're not going down the middle. Now, granted, this team does get scored on, but assuming his teammates are going to get back with this ball, Evo needs to be grabbing pads, rushing out down the middle. So I think I'm going to put this down. So Drees still cuts into the play unnecessary. So I think we can remove that part from Drees. And we can actually turn this into a weakness of Dignitas. Weakness of Dignitas. The team seems to not understand the importance of having a player trying to be useful off the ball on defense. Example, watching middle for pass on defense, or looking for demos on their rotation back to defense. So that's a big issue that we're noticing from the structure of Dignitas, is we're not noticing off-ball pressure from Dignitas on the defensive end of things. Now, in terms of strengths, all 3 players are amazing on the ball. Great mechanics. And then on offense, all 3 players understand the importance of having a ball game, support guy, and off ball pressure guy. But for example, their weaknesses on defense, there's no off ball pressure guy. They tend to rush back to defense. So there we go. We're starting to really flesh out just from one replay what are the main issues from pros. And you're probably wondering, like, why am I taking mistakes from one replay? For me, I'm looking, if I see one mistake, I'm not counting that. I'm talking about if I see 3 mistakes in a row in one replay from a pro, that just shouldn't be happening. If you're at the professional level, you should not be making the same mistake 3 times in a row. If you are, that's part of your game that you do have to work on. Here we go, though. For example, I think when looking at Team Liquid, we talked about how Achronic, when he was supporting his second man, was a million miles away from the play. And we've talked about many times on the stream so far that when it comes to supporting your teammates, if you're not supporting close, from behind, facing forward, you're not actually supporting your teammates. And close being that main idea. If you're not supporting close, you are going to harm your team. And why do you support close? Well, imagine I throw a basketball or any kind of ball at you. Are your arms going to be locked out in front of you and you try to catch it with your hands? Or are you going to try and catch it with your hands as you're bringing the ball into your body, bringing it close to you, giving it that support, right? You're going to be bringing it close into you, bringing that support, right? But, for example, if you're holding a baby, for example, would you hold the baby with your arms locked out in front of you? Or would you hold them close to you in your arms, cradling them, giving them support? You bring it close. You bring the baby close to you, right? And taking the key idea in mind, support, you need to be close to have effective support of anything. In the case of the baby, it's unsafe, but 2, it's efficient and it's effective. When it comes down to catching a basketball with your arms, bringing it close to you, it's efficient, it's effective, it's faster, right? And then, talk about Rocket League. You can support your teammate from super far away, but it's not efficient, it's not as effective as it can be, etc. Right? Now, can you catch a basketball with your arms locked? Sure. Can you hold a baby with your arms locked? Sure. Can you support in Rocket League far away? Sure. You can do all 3 of those things, but it's less effective, it's less efficient, and overall, at least for the baby's sake, it's less safe and it's slower as well. I carry a baby with one hand from the leg. Alright, Abdiel. But there we go. So that's why, for example, when we look at Achronic, this is something that we noticed from Achronic. He did every single game. We looked at a group stage match. We looked at a quarterfinal match. We looked at a semifinal match. We looked at a grand final match. All those matches, Achronic had this issue. And when did we notice it? I noticed it in the first game we looked at in the group stage on stream. We noticed that he had this issue. And the only reason why I called it out is because in that one replay, he had done it more than 2 times. That's all it takes for a pro to notice that it's a mistake. It's a bad habit for a pro is if it happens more than 2 times. So, for example, now that we're looking at Dignitas, we're looking at Dries. He's cut into the rotation more times than he should be. It's not just a one-off mistake. Andy, he's reacting to where the ball is going rather than reading where the ball is going. This is a common mistake. But, for example, when we look at their strengths, we've not seen one issue with possession or on offense. Their offense is golden. But the only mistake is individually, Dries cuts his teammates off sometimes. That's the only issue with the rotation. But, for example, looking at the weaknesses of the team, we've seen multiple times where none of the players on the rotation back to defense is applying off-ball pressure. That is a weakness for Dignitas that other teams can exploit. Because like we talked about before, if there's no off-ball pressure, you're giving more space to the other team. And if you're already on defense and you give more space to the other team, you're just asking for really offensive teams to score goals. For example, that's why a team like Crew Esports, even though they have a lot of weaknesses individually, as a team, their offense and defense is really strong. So a team like Dignitas could lose to a team like Crew Esports. But at the same time, a team like Vitality has very similar issues to Dignitas and G1, so Dignitas could also beat G1 or Vitality. And we also have to keep in mind, too, for example, Dignitas, individually, 2 players like Evo and Drees are really good at reading the play as well. So even if they don't have off-ball pressure, I'm sure their defense can hold off. Sometimes, even though they don't have the off-ball pressure, I'm sure individually they can kind of make up for that team skill issue. But even then, playing against the best teams in the world, you might be able to save a couple saves, but if the other team has constant pressure because you have no off-ball pressure, then you're going to be screwed. I mean, it's just a simple fact of it. Here we go. Par flicks that ball over, but I think I'm still trying to see. I think boost is Evo's issue. He's trying to stay fast the entire time, but he's wasting a lot of boost, and he's going out of his way to get boost. So I think we're finally found Evo's issue. But honestly, boost being your only issue in a pro level game is insane. Of course, we've seen Evo rush back, but it looks like that's more of a team thing. Luckily for Dignitas, Nick, I'm sure he'll notice that off-ball pressure being one of the weaker areas on defense for Dignitas. So I'm sure that he can easily try and help Dignitas work on that going into the major. And it could also be a thing where the players don't focus on it in the tournament, right? Because, for example, maybe Nick has helped the team. Oh my goodness, look at this shot here. But for example, maybe Nick's worked on it with them in scrims, but if the team doesn't know to focus on it in a tournament, maybe the bad habits come back for a tournament setting. So hopefully Nick's able to help Dignitas with the off-ball pressure on defense. But look at this shot here from Evo. Great mechanics, great possession. Fantastic stuff there from Evo. But we did notice them multiple times in that game. So, of course, everybody, when we go into the next replay, we're going to be reassessing these things. Will we be seeing the same mistakes? Will we be seeing more mistakes, possibly? Who knows? But when we go into the next replay, we'll see. For Evo here, tends to not rotate through pads, leaving himself at lower boost than most pros, leaving him ineffective towards the team in some situations. And if we remember, he had low boost on one of the goals that Shopify Rebellion scored, which if he had grabbed pads more effectively on the rotation back, did him okay. So overall, boost management. There we go. We have found the issues for Dignitas, for the individuals, their strengths, and their weaknesses of the team. Now you're probably wondering, like, well, Dignitas, it looks like their weaknesses, they only have like one major weakness. They only have one major weakness, and then some individual weaknesses. So like, shouldn't Dignitas be able to beat a team like Pioneers? Well, not necessarily. Because if we look at KCP, their issue is their adaptability to unorthodox situations, but individually, Scrub and Banana Head have some bad habits that actually work to fill in the rotation. And then the only issue for them is they just challenge the ball too early for the most part sometimes, or they force low instead of high. Which just seems to be more of a, and then of course they also have a boost issue as well. But for example, when we look at the structure on offense and defense, for KCP is actually very solid. Their only issues on defense is the adaptability, which individually the players fill in for, right? So KCP could still easily beat a team like Dignitas. But at the same time, KCP's weaknesses could also be exploited by a very great offensive team like Dignitas, right? So for example, KCP and Dignitas, that could be a Game 5 series with KCP having more experience, and they would probably win. Could be a Game 4 for KCP as well, just based on experience alone. But for example, that's why we have to compare weaknesses and strengths and the individual skill. That's why we're going over all 5 things. We're going over each individual, the strengths of the team, and the weaknesses of the team. Because without all 5, you can't get a full picture on how good a team really is. But there we go. Now what I do want to look at, one game from Gen G. And what's it called? What would be a good game? Probably Game 4 versus Gen G. So let's look at Game 4 versus Gen G. Round 3. Now, one thing, of course, we want to do is we want to look at the stats. I always like looking at the stats. Stats don't tell you the full picture, but it does tell you a couple things. Look at this. Demos inflicted. Drees has a good amount of demos, But look at his teammates. The players with the least amount of high-level experience are the ones that have no demos. And Drees ends up dying a little bit more, but it could also be because he's getting demoed while he's demoing other players. But look at this. Chronic doesn't get demoed at all for the most part. Apparently Jack, he actually got demoed a little bit and only got demoed a little bit, but compared to say Andy, he got demoed a lot for no demos in return. Normally you want to make sure that your demos taken is a little bit less than your demos inflicted. For example, Noli, good. Apparently Jack, barely not good. So apparently Jack could have improved on this in this game. Chronic, good for the most part, right? But when we look at Andy, that's bad. Evo's at least even, so that's fine. But for example, he just has a low amount of demos in general, so that's why this would still be an issue. Here we go, looking at average boost. Average boost was an issue for Evo in the last game, and it looks like it's an issue for Drees as well. Look at the average boost. I mean, look at Gen G, and it looks like they just have an average a little bit more boost than the team, but this can dictate a game, especially for a top team like Gen G. And looking at big pads tend to be okay. Drees and Evo, of course, really big pad players. They're stealing a lot of boosts. And stolen big pads, yeah, look at stolen big pads here. Drees, apparently Jack. Evo has a good, actually looking at this, not a lot of big stolen pads. So Evo has, so this shows us, since there's not a lot of stolen big pads from Evo, but he still grabs a lot and not a lot of mini pads, that shows a boost issue with Evo, which in the last game we already saw. And then looking at movement, players, Drees, apparently Jack, Evo, Chronic tend to be really, actually, excuse me, Chronic didn't actually be that fast in here, the situation. But we can also look at the ground percentage. Normally the best players on the team are normally the ones that are on the ground the most because they're picking the right opportunities to go. However, we saw with Andy, he kind of reacts to the play rather than reading the play, so his low percentage could honestly be an idea more of he hesitates. Whereas with Evo and Drees, we saw they read the play, so their percentage being at 51 is honestly really good. And of course, Gen G, they're just really solid players. They know when to go for the ball. But overall, let's look at Game 4, Gen G versus Dignitas. By the way, everybody, you don't need to be quiet in chat as well. If you have any questions or if you want to add on to the analysis, by all means, say something in chat and I will say out whatever you say. As long as it's within reason, of course. Here we go. Drees, he actively reads where that ball is going, but I think we're starting to see it's more. So we talked about earlier, Evo jumping early for a ball, and this Evo, like Drees, this challenge ends up being useless. Like a lot of players, I think Fairy Peak back in RLCS was always like, I have to, you have an announcement, I have to go shower and go to the bathroom. All right, Avdio, well, have fun doing that. We're going to keep doing this. But I believe back in RLCS, Fairy Peak talked about, or at least by what I could tell by the translation of the YouTube video, he talked about how North American players just let the other team challenge for the most part. And that's not necessarily the case. The top teams of North America, they wait for it to become threatening before they actually jump. And if we actually look at Europe now compared to RLCS, Europe does the same stuff as North America on challenges. It just maybe there's one or two players out there on a team that might misunderstand going when it's threatening, and sometimes they do cause goals. Actually, I believe one of those players was, I believe when we looked at Liquid. No, it wasn't Liquid. It was actually JNAPS actually had an issue forcing too early sometimes. And I believe Ahmad had some issues with that as well. Drew Esports had an issue with that. And then Pioneers also had an issue with that as well. So there are some teams that don't know how important forcing high is, and forcing high when it's threatening is. Because, for example, here, like we talked about last game with Evo, but this time it's Drees. This challenge ends up being useless, right? That challenge did nothing to help out Dignitas, and actually they got scored on. Now imagine if Drees doesn't go up for this ball here. He just recognizes it's not threatening, so he grabs the boost. Go over to him right now. And let's do what he should do here. We wait. We see Nola's air dribbling through the air. It's not threatening. Let's say he keeps air dribbling through the air and then once he actually gets above the goal box, force high, and his teammate would cover backboard and get a free possession every day of the week. That seems like hindsight bias, but that is actually how defense is supposed to be played at the top level teams. Maybe we'll see Gen G apply some of that knowledge, and we can give you guys an example of a team actually forcing high when they should. But for example, I think we've noticed now that's gonna be that's across 2 games that we've seen this issue. So I think for Dignitas we found something else being an issue, and it's the same thing. Individually, when challenging the ball, they tend to either go for when it's not threatening, or they force low instead of high. So far, it's only forcing too early. So that's what I'm going to put. Individually, they go when it's not threatening, aka when it's too early. There we go. Oh, that guy. They rush back when for individually when they challenge the ball, they tend to either go when it is not threatening, aka when it is too early. So I think we've finally found another weakness for Dignitas, and since it's a similar issue to KCP, that only adds more onto if KCP and Dignitas were to play each other, for example, that we could definitely see KCP winning that one just with their experience alone. And KCP are also very mechanical as well. Threes. Ends up going for kind of a useless challenge again, but it's kind of that what we're seeing. Sometimes we're seeing useless challenges from Dignitas. And look at that. Fake from apparently Jack. Apparently Jack knew he didn't have to force there. Here we go. Apparently Jack through the air. Threes fills in support again very quickly. Almost gets the touch he needs. Andy taking possession here. Puts it to Evo. Great mechanics there from Evo. Great possession from Dries for the most part. Alright. Let's see what ends up happening here. See if there's a passing opportunity. That's just a bad pass from Evo. I think this was an okay opportunity that Dries recognized. He recognized that the midfield is open and Chronic was applying pressure. But since Evo made a pretty poor pass, Chronic was able to really get up for that ball. Alright, let's see what happens here. Up for this one, Dries. Great read, great shot. So like we talked about, the mechanics on Dignitas very, very solid. And honestly, if we compare the mechanics on Dignitas to other teams, say like G1, honestly, we could say a team like G1 has less mechanics than Dignitas. There we go. But for example, G1, they might be better at the passing side of mechanics, right? So it's never clean cut. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at G1, of course, so we'll be able to compare the 2 5th seeds to each other. Great bump attempt. He almost got a redirect as well. And like we said, the offense for Dignitas, our only issue is an individual mistake from Dries sometimes where he cuts into the play. But overall, Dignitas do look really solid. Let's see. Evo. Dries is starting to... As we talked about how Evo and Dries, for the most part, are really good at reading the play. I think, for me, it's just Dries could get a little bit better at reading the play. Whereas Andy tends to not read the play at all. I do want to go back to Andy's POV. Oh, right as he misses as well. Let's see. As you can see, like, when we look at Evo or Dries, they're constantly facing the play because they know where the ball's going. When we look at Andy, he's constantly facing away from the play. He only turns towards the play after something happens, aka he's reacting to it. And that's why he gets so easily beat by players that can easily read the play. And one of the best players at reading the play, at least when it came to 1 and 2s last season, was apparently Jack. And this season, he's shown it in 3s as well. So if you aren't reading the play against apparently Jack, you're going to give him free space every day of the week. All right, let's see what happens here. So you guys will probably find it really funny when we look at Dignitas versus Space Station, because actually we can get a really good gauge of how teams will do on land by a series like Space Station versus Dignitas. Now, Drees has shown confidence on land before, even when being not a favorite team for land. I mean, he was on a 5th seeded team in Optic last season, but again, seem to not respect Drees as much as they should. Now, granted, we're seeing a decent amount of mistakes from Drees in series like this, but sometimes all it takes is experience and mechanics, and you can perform on land, and Drees has shown that. And I will say, on G2, at the Fall Major, Drees was probably the best player at the Fall Major, like, without a doubt. Drees was taking possession. He wasn't panicking. He was sticking to his rotation and his structure. Overall, although I will say, if we were to look at RLCS gameplay from RLCS Fall Major, the analysis we'd be doing would be far different. Like right here, we're noticing a lot of mistakes, but teams are constantly improving. Back then, we still wouldn't see a million mistakes, but we'd see a lot of mistakes still. There we go, tied game from Dignitas. But for the most part, we have found Dignitas' issues, so now we're just seeing how the issues affect them against certain teams. That's a bad 50 from Andy. Drees has to get the touch here. He will. Andy passes the ball up to Evo. Not necessarily the best pass, but it's not the end of the world. Drees gets bumped. Let's see how Andy reads the play here. Again, not the best 50-50. And then, ooh, great save from Evo. Andy grabbing pads. Let's see which issue of Dignitas is why they end up getting scored on here. Let's see which issue. Evo up to Andy. Andy puts the ball up in the corner. What is happening here? Okay. I wasn't expecting a bad goal. Oh, it looks like the rushing back of players caused an issue there. Look at Drees. Oh, Drees rushing and cutting rotation. That's why. So, like, right here, Drees, he reads where the ball's bouncing, but he's not aware of his opponent. He's getting completely dusted. And then Evo, he was also rushing back, but now looking at it, he probably just saw Drees jump and thought, okay, I need to fill in behind Drees. And he actually would have had a good read on apparently Jack, but he didn't see Noli there. Or, was it Noli or is that Chronic? I think it was Chronic, actually. Was it Chronic? No, it was Noli. Okay, they just have green cars. Yeah, so that's an issue from Drees that caused a goal. Cutting rotation. That's caused a couple of goals now for for Dignitas. But yeah, major issue for Dignitas there. But still, overall, Dignitas looking very solid. I'm trying to see what we can add for strengths for Dignitas. I think overall they are confident players. So I think that's something, and people are like, well, confidence doesn't mean it. Yeah, confidence means a lot. Confident players when on the ball as well. Which I think we can just put that are amazing on the amazing and confident on the ball. And I'm not just looking at weaknesses. I'm looking at everything when I'm looking at these teams. Alright, so now we can look at the all-important Dignitas versus Space Station game that this was. Oh boy. Y'all don't even want to see this game 5. The mistakes on both teams were insane. Playoffs, round 1. SSG versus Dig. Let's look at the stats. How are the stats in a series like this? Demos inflicted, Evo and Drees. Okay, there we go. See, there we go. Day by day. Because of course all the replays we just saw were on day 1. This is actually no, this was also day 1. So Nick actually working really hard with his team here to improve on the off-ball pressure side of things. And all three players are doing that, and they were also avoiding demos for the most part as well. And for Drees, he had the most amount of demos against on his team, but he still kept it even with his demos inflicted. So this is why it's okay. Looking at boost, let's see, do they fix the average boost? Okay, Evo still has boost problems. Big pads, though, we can definitely see when we look at stolen. Okay, stolen pick. Okay, so Evo may have fixed his big boost problem, But at least in terms of average boost, he tends to have a lot less than everyone else. And then looking at speed-wise, Dries and Evo on top makes sense. Normally you expect Daniel to be very high, so this is actually very rare for Daniel. Looking at the ground percentage, you can tell the most experienced players normally on the ground. We're seeing Andy on the ground a little bit more. We already talked about it, that this seems more of a hesitancy set for Andy, where he kind of just doesn't read the play, so he hesitates before jumping for a ball. But Evo and Dries, they're still at relatively good spot. Evo actually gained 5% on the ground stat, so maybe he got a lot more nervous and hesitated more in this series, but Dries still had a good 51%. But we also have seen he kind of jumps for some balls that he shouldn't, and I think that's something we should keep in mind as well. For Dries, jumps for balls he is clearly getting beat to. Nerves could improve his ability to read the play and not rush. So unlike Andy, where it's a full-on issue, he does read the play, but he's not as optimized with it yet. Let's try. Here we go, game 4. We lose. This will definitely be a very interesting game 5 here. Whew. Got it past Arsenal. Dries almost getting a shot attempt there. Yeah, we're starting to see a lot more unnecessary jumps. But for example, this is an issue we found here with jumping too early and going for a big boost. This is an issue we found from the group stages. So when teams are nervous, what's going to happen? The mistakes that the teams already had are just going to get bigger. New mistakes normally don't form when you get nervous. Normally it's those mistakes you already have that get worse. But for example, a thing like we talked about, a strength for Dignitas was possession. All 3 players still taking possession even in a very nerve-wracking game like this. So that's why, like, it goes even more to the point where if you already have something down on a group stage, even when you're nervous, you're still going to do it. The only issue you're seeing from right now from Dignitas is on defense, they're still rushing a lot. Or cutting into the play, or maybe they're force high a little too early. Oh! Or in Andy's case, can't read the play. Right here, this should never be a goal. Especially if you're able to read what Arsenal's actually doing there, that should never be a goal. Arsenal should never be getting a free goal like that, especially in a game 5. Man, the nerve-wracking game here. I remember watching it because I wanted either Dignitas or M80 to make the major from North America, just so we could continue to try and grow the experience of the North American player pool. Which until Psionics actually expand the amount of teams at the majors, we're not going to see that until they do that. So that's why right now we have to... Ooh, another... see, big cut from Dries. Slows down the rotation of the team. Like I've been talking about. We talked about this in the first replay. Tends to cut into the play unnecessarily, which slows down his teammates, such the flow of the rotation. And right here, what does he do? He cuts across the pitch, makes Andy completely flop all over the place. Andy thought, so it was like, oh, there's no way Dries cuts in here, and yet Dries still does. So that's a big, big issue. All right, through the air, here comes Evo, getting the bump, trying to set up something for his team. Here comes Dries off the sidewall. Andy puts it off the backboard. Follow up from Evo and Dries. That's the one thing, Dries' issue, it causes a lot of inconsistency for Dignitas, but at the same time, if the other team isn't playing their best, it could also be really annoying for the other team to have to deal with, right? So, it's kind of a double-edged sword, but if Dries is able to just pick and choose when to cut properly, it could be a very good playstyle for Dignitas, but right now their basic structure is off, and you can't really work on a playstyle until you have the structure down. You might still notice a playstyle tendency, but you can't fully practice a playstyle until you understand structure. And I think G2 and Falcons have really shown that. Falcons tend to be very solo play oriented, very 50 oriented. It does make them very one-dimensional, so their playstyle might not be the best, but at the same time, their rotations were already very, very structured. But since the rotations are already structured, they're able to work on that playstyle. G2, they have the exact opposite playstyle of Falcons, but they have a very structured rotation, which means they're able to practice a playstyle of passing a lot, right? G2's structure and rotation have been really solid for a very long time. Where now most of G2's issues actually are individual sided. Great mechanics here from Andy, but that, like we talked about, right? Even though we've seen Andy look nervous everywhere else on the pitch, when he has the ball, he still has possession. That's a strength that we put for Dignitas. They're always confident and amazing on the ball mechanically. Again, Andy not reading the play there. That was should have been a free support opportunity there for Andy. Here we go, getting possession, keeping possession. Flicks the ball over to Dries, and Evo, and that will be a goal as well. Great stuff. Dignitas end up throwing the 2-goal lead. Like right here, I was like, okay, Dignitas are actually making it. And then right afterwards, they end up getting scored on twice. So let's see how that ends up happening. Grabs the back left. Evo not able to get there. Ooh, Daniel ends up faking out that one. Andy with the possession, though. Andy through the air. Reset. Flicks the ball mid. Ooh, double commit. I remember that. So now it's up to Andy to make the save. Great challenge, though, there from Andy. He may react to the ball sometimes, but he still manages to get some great challenges on it. Here we go. We're starting to see Space Station really amping up on the demos. And why are Space Station able to ramp up on so much pressure? Because whenever we see it, when we're looking at Dignitas, no one is looking for off-ball pressure on the defensive end of the pitch. That's why when Space Station get to the offensive end, it takes a really big heroic effort from the individuals of Dignitas to get the ball there. Because right here, brilliant challenge from Andy. If that challenge didn't come in, they were stuck on defense for another little while. I think I scored on twice in the last 50 seconds of the game. For shame. Ends up getting bumped, but that's fine. What the? Oh, Evo on 0 boost. Another issue you've been talking about all series. He wastes his boost going for that touch. And then when he lands, he doesn't grab any pads. He just goes for a ball. Granted, that could have been seen as a force, but let's look at Dries. But granted, he needs to be grabbing boost. I mean, even then, we could say that he was going for the ball too early. Dries is actually rushing. And there we go. We talked about Dries rushing this entire time. He goes for a big boost. And look at that. That goal wasn't scored of individual mistakes. It was actually scored off of they rush back to net or get to big boost. And also, they tend to go when it's not threatening or when it's too early. Evo, he went when it was too early. Dries went for a big boost, and that's why they got scored on. Honestly, for me, it's like I feel sad when I see some of these teams make the same issues over and over again. At the same time, as a coach, I understand that it does take a lot of time to practice and get things into the subconscious, break bad habits. And by what it looks like, Nick actually helped out the team day of the group stage. They have the group stage. They don't have the best games against Shopify or Gen G. They play against a team like Space Station. And then they picked up on the demo game. So honestly, Nick, really solid coach for being able to fix at least some issues between series. At least they're picking up more on the demo side of things. And yeah, it's another goal here. How's this goal end up going in? Was it just a misread from Andy? I think so. Oh, it's also a rushing back from Evo, I think. Yep, Evo has boost, but he rushes straight. He's not covering the middle or anything like that. He's just going to rush back in a net here instead of covering the middle. Dries gets a touch. Oh, actually, no, excuse me. Evo is actually fine in that situation. It was Andy. Andy goes for this ball. He is now off-ball pressure guy. What we want to see from him is apply off-ball pressure on defense. Grab pads, look to watch the middle. And if he had done that, he would have gotten out of Evo's way. And the ball ends up getting passed, and this is something he could cut off. And that would have been, there would have been no goal opportunity there. But since he ends up rushing back to net, look at this here from Andy. Andy just looks lost. He rushes to a front post boost that's not there. He bumps his teammate. And then now he's behind his teammate. Now he's on 0 boost. And now he misreads the play again right here. So yeah, big issues from Andy in that situation. And Evo, he tried to get back. But Evo, honestly, still looking confident, even though with the, for example, me and a few other people that I know, that even when nervous, that you still tend to be able to play your best game, or at least mechanically play your best game. Oh my goodness, it should have been all over for Space Station here. But Daniel, he missed what to him is normally an empty net. Oh, he had 0 boost. Finished the ball to the backboard. Oh, Daniel, that should be a goal every day of the week for you, little bro. Oh no. But jokes aside, let's look at why. Right here, how'd this play even start? Kick off back to, oh, it all started with a poor hit and miss from Evo. So, but there we go. I mean, I would say that's just a one-time miss from Evo there, and like that, if FSG would have won off of that, it would have technically, I would have called it luck. Evo should not have been. That's like one of those few times where like no pro is really missing a touch like that. It wasn't that hard of a read, and they still ended up missing. 0-second goal, maybe? Nah. Back to Drees. He's going to take... Ooh, miss from Drees. The nerves are setting in. So, aka for Dignitas, when under extreme anxiety and pressure, they sometimes miss balls. Under extreme. But they're still at least trying to take possession here, right? That's what we're seeing. We're seeing they're at least trying to take possession. They're just kind of missing the ball a little bit. And we actually see a lot of saves in a row. Ooh, that's a poor touch there from Evo, but he ends up getting the ball to offense. Grabbing the boost. You'll see on offense, they're still applying alpha pressure, but on defense, they're not trying to go for it. They're not trying to apply... Oh, going for a big boost. That's unnecessary. Here's the first save of the overtime. Great read from Evo there. Evo's been looking really good. Individually, Evo's actually looking like one of the best players on the team. At least when it comes to his mechanics and defensive end of things. When it comes to his boost management, still needs to be far better. But luckily, we're starting to see in boost management it's more of a team issue. And remember, everybody, after we're done with all these streams, after all 16 teams have been done and analyzed, all the notes that I have from all these streams will be posted to a document for anybody to use. If you're a commentator, you can use it. Coach, you can use it. And I highly doubt it, but if a pro team ends up using it, then by all means, I mean, I did the work for you. I mean, we're already seeing, like, all the issues from, like, even from the group stage match, to the Gen G match, to this being the most nerve-wracking match of Dignitas in the history of this roster. Granted, they haven't been around that long, but looking at all these issues... You can definitely see why the nerves, but look at that. On offense, the off-ball pressure puts the ball in the back of the net. Look at this. Finally, when Dignitas are on offense, they've never had issues with this. Their structure and their rotations on offense, perfect. It's only on defense where they have these issues, and they were able to get the goal. And if you're able to win a game like that, I mean, it's just... something that you have to respect. If you're able to win a game like that, for example, Vitality, they haven't had a match like that. Vitality are playing in a very inconsistent region, and they managed to make the major off of one top 2, I think, and the rest were like top 8s, I think, for Vitality. So Dignitas, they have a really good chance. This, right? Because look at this, Vitality, they got top 2, losing to Carmine Corps, of course. Winter Cup, they get a top 8, losing the quadrant. And the Winter Invitational, they get a top 8 again. So, Dignitas did pretty much the exact same thing for the most part. They didn't get a top 2, but they got a top 4 and a top 8. And then, I think they maybe had one non-top 8. North America, Winter Cup. They were one game off top 8. Ended up losing the Knights. What the next the next regional, they ended up sweeping Knights, or excuse me, they didn't end up beating Knights. Did they end up beating? Knights ended up getting knocked out 0-3, so works out for them. But North America, they're getting a lot closer. North America teams, they tend to be far more consistent too. So a team like Dignitas being able to squeak through, insane. But here we go. We'll look at one more game here. We'll look at Game 4, Complexity versus Dignitas. But honestly, we're probably not going to be seeing huge. We're not going to be seeing anything different, really. I think this series will actually be better than what we just saw. Crush M80, best team NA. Yeah, Crush the Percy homie. Percy is, of course, the GOAT. Although I've heard issues with mental in the past, I've just heard that from other pros saying that. But I don't know if Percy's had really had issues with mental. But anyway, let's look at the stats here. I'd have loved to see M80 make the major, though. I honestly think M80 could have actually pulled off some huge upsets with how they play. But they didn't make it, so sad for them. Looking at the demos inflicted, Evo, Dree, so Dree's and Andy. But what we like to do is look at the threshold for this. Evo, he got a lot of demos, but he died a lot too, so this could still be improved. Looking at it from Dree's POV, relatively equal, so that's fine. And Andy's 1 for 7.75, so that's good. Looking at the average boost, of course, I expect Evo to be towards... Oh, Evo actually improved his boost usage in the quarterfinal there. Maybe Nick pointed out that to him. Big pads, Evo tends to be fairly high. Drees does as well. He's improving that. And then stolen pads, really high as well. Looking at the movement, speed, Drees and Evo, of course, on top. Andy relatively slower. AJG, really slow, but they still end up winning the series. Looking at the ground percentage... Andy's starting to look a lot better here. Maybe when he's nervous, he tends to be a lot more hesitant. So maybe that's why he's on the ground a little bit less here, because he's less hesitant. But who knows? I wish we were all going to. We would have been so hyped. Yeah, I would have loved to see M80 make it. For me, it was M80 or Dignitas. I wanted either team to go. I wanted either team to make it. Just because I want NA to have just more teams with LAN experience. Of course, I prefer just to be more teams at major events for all the regions, but of course, that would take a lot of preparation for Psionics and probably a lot more money. Ooh. I'm looking at the wrong player here, but... Here we go. Andy puts the ball, double tap mid, follow up from Evo. Great and again, it's just showing how Evo is one of the few players on this team that actually can read where this ball is going. Reads the ball coming out mid and goes. Maybe you could even read that a little bit sooner too, but still, very fantastic stuff. Staying with Trey as coach as well as in San Diego, yeah. Speaking of Trey, I played him 6-mans twice. I played with him on my team in 6-mans yesterday, or 2 days ago, excuse me. And then I also had him on the other team, and when I won with him on my team, and then I beat him when he was on the other team, but. I heard from one of my friends that Trey said that he hates people that are unironically nice. Because I say good luck, have fun every single game. I'm a kind person, or I try to be a kind person anyway. But apparently Trey hates me for that. He's been grinding, yeah. He's been grinding B, yeah. Maybe his little treat. We can look at the M80 coach after this. But here we go. Let's look at this. Demo, CRR, back to Raise Bull. Yeah, we can definitely see why Complexity are such a strong team. I mean, they structurally are strong, and I can't wait to look at Complexity and write down their notes. Alright, great stuff, Luke. Thank you so much. Welcome back to the stream. Welcome. Here we go. Evo pops the ball up to Andy. Let's see how the support's filled in. Okay, Evo almost had a bad rotation there, but now he's feeling to fill in second for Andy. That's good. Great read. Possession time. Can you get a shot? Ooh, very close. See how this one ends up going now. 3 Evo. But yeah, overall, when Dignitas are on offense or when they have the ball, they are a fantastic team. But once they don't have the ball, their defense seems to be their biggest issue. Part of it's Andy, because Andy doesn't read the play. Part of it's Evo, because he has 0 boost half the time. And part of it's Drees, because he cuts people off. And the whole team, of course, they tend to either rush a challenge on offense. They try to rush some challenges. But here, it just looks like it was just a really good play there from CRR. Well, how does it start anyway? Let's see. Drees loses the 50. Drees does something that Evo doesn't read. Yeah, so I would say that's more on Drees rushing and trying to touch another ball he doesn't need to. But still, good stuff overall from Dignitas. But we could definitely see why they ended up losing to Complexity here in the series. Complexity is like that, just that little bit more consistent on all the different issues that they just have. Looks like Complexity have less weaknesses overall than Dignitas. Because so many people, they talk about high-level Rocket League teams being the stronger teams or the team that wins, but honestly, with how many nerves are on the line, with how good mechanics are nowadays, it's normally which teams have more weaknesses. There, of course, we talked about at the beginning of the stream, there's a few teams that are kind of some exceptions. FaZe, they have a lot of weaknesses, but individually they're so good that their strengths just make up for that. And don't get me wrong, FaZe have actually, in the last 2 regionals, improved a lot of their weaknesses, but before then, they were still getting top 4s, right? So, the main reason why they were able to do that is they're just kind of one of those exceptions where, even if they have a lot of weaknesses, they have a lot of strengths to make up for it. Oxygen are another one of those teams where they are just a very strong team, and it kind of makes up for their weaknesses a lot of the time. And then, for example, there's some teams that are exact opposite as well. I mean, excuse me, Liquid are also one of those teams where, like, they have a lot of weaknesses, but they can also make up for their weaknesses. And we saw this, like, for example, when we look at Power versus Liquid, for example, in the first 2 games, in the first 2 games, Liquid just mechanically are just better. Games 3 and 4, though, Power showed that they have less weaknesses. They are very consistent. And it's very weird to hear that, like, the OCE teams right now that we're seeing, unlike last season or even KCP in the Fall Major, just, they did not look confident. But when we look at all the OCE teams right now, they are looking very consistent, even compared to some NA and EU teams. So, OCE back on the rise. Sam, of course, has... when we looked at Crew actually had a lot of weaknesses. I don't expect to see a lot of weaknesses from Secret, but Crew just mechanically are really, really good. And they're also really fast as well. They understand you need demos on offense. Crew are essentially Dignitas, but with a better offense and a worse defense. That's kind of what you can describe for Crew. But overall, but looking at that, Crew do have a lot more weaknesses. So Dignitas, honestly, I think I would give Dignitas the edge in a Crew matchup. I still think Crew would win against G1 and Vitality, but in a Crew versus Dignitas matchup, I think Dignitas have leveled up in that regards for me. I think Dignitas would beat Crew if they played. Now, would Dignitas beat KCP? I think KCP I think KCP just have less weaknesses. They're very mechanical, and they have more offense, or at least their weaknesses are made up for. KCP are another one of those teams where mechanically, if they're confident, they can kind of make up for their mistakes. So I think KCP would still narrowly beat out a Team Dignitas, but still, overall, it's great to see how many teams are still improving as time's gone on here in RLCS. Here we go. Let's see how Complexity win the series here in this overtime. Great save. Oh, wait. Did I miss see that? Did Raiseville save it? No, okay, Andy did. Okay. Looked weird for a second. I looked away from my monitor. But yeah, I mean, that's a good thing, though. I mean, about watching all these replays, we can still see that all the goals against and for are pretty much matching play for play what the note we have down for the notes. Grease cuts unnecessarily. He jumps for balls he's getting beat to sometimes. He has to improve his ability to read the play. Andy, he doesn't read the play at all for the most part. He has to react. He's reacting to it instead of reading it, which causes him to be slower. Evo tends to not rotate through pads, even at lower boost. And overall, his boost management is just bad in general. But for example, their strengths, they are amazing when they have the ball. They're confident when they have the ball. Great mechanics. And then on offense, all 3 players understand the importance of having all 3 players. But for example, on the other side, on defense, they don't have an off-ball pressure guy, so that's one issue. They tend to rush back to net or to big boosts due to that, having no off-ball pressure. And then individually, when challenging the ball, sometimes they go too early. They know to force high, but they go too early. Well, a lot of people have been asking me to do this for other teams. Right now, I'm planning on just doing the 16 teams for the Major. But a lot of people have asked me to do Limitless and SSA. People have asked me to do even Elevate and APAC. So I think, and an NRG, Furia, people ask me for a lot of different teams, so I would definitely love to look at that. But I think we have finally fixed our notes here. And for those of y'all who don't know, tomorrow, so for day 7, you'll be looking at G1 for EU, so that'll be tomorrow. But here we go. Here's the notes we have for today. Dries, he tends to cut into the play unnecessarily, which slows down his teammates, lets the flow of the rotation. Very similar to Banana Head. And then when nervous, he turns the play and cuts even more in rotation. aka he rests his position a lot. And then he also jumps for some balls he's clearly getting beat to. This is more of an individual thing as well. Andy tends to react to where the ball is going instead of reading where it is going. This causes him to be slower to the ball to some balls compared to opponents who do read the play. For Evo, he tends to rotate through He tends to not rotate through pads, leaving him at lower boost than most pros, which leaves him leaving him ineffective towards the team in some situations. And overall, needs to work on boost management. But you'd expect a ones player to be a lot better at this, but threes, of course, is a little bit different of a game mode. Strengths, all 3 players are amazing and confident on the ball. Great mechanics. On offense, all 3 players understand the importance of having a ball guy, support guy, and off-ball pressure guy. So on offense, they have all 3 positions, but the team seems to not understand the importance of having a player trying to be useful off the ball on defense. So even though they have all 3 on offense, they don't have all 3 on defense, just the ball guy and the support guy. And then watching middle for watching middle and pass on defense, or looking for demos on the rotation back to defense. They're missing out on that, though, which means they rush back to net or grab big boost instead. And individually, when challenging the ball, they tend to either go when it is not threatening, aka when it's too early. But that will be the issues that Dignitas have in this series. So, overall, I think right now these are pretty much good notes. I think we have fixed our notes here for Dignitas. And that's it here for the deep dive analysis for today. But I do want to thank everybody who showed up to this stream. Thank you to everyone who's been following over the last couple of days. We've honestly gotten a decent amount of follows over the last couple of days. So thank you everybody who has ended up showing up. It's been a pleasure doing these streams for y'all. And I can't wait for me being able to post all these different notes for everyone to be able to see and use for themselves. I mean, like, even if you have the notepad open, you can just be like, okay, what match is happening right now? Oh, Falcons versus Dignitas. Like, let's look at the notes that Luke put up and see how it goes. But now my question is, do I like my predictions still for how I have Dignitas going through? So we talked about I think G2 after we analyze them. This is a good prediction. The only reason why G2 have the edge here, it's a North American land, and G2 have never lost a phase on land. So overall, that's why I think G2 are looking fine. For Crew, I think Crew, this match could go either way, but I think Crew just slightly have the edge based on my... But of course, we're going to look at G1 tomorrow. Maybe we'll look at G1 tomorrow, and they're just the favorites over Crew. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but that's one thing tomorrow. But for right now, we have Dignitas barely beating Vitality. First round of a match. Dignitas definitely look very solid. Vitality have been looking inconsistent, so round 1 is the king of inconsistency, so... Overall, this should be, I think Dignitas winning here is fine. Losing to Dignitas, to Carmine Corps, that's understandable, and losing to Falcons. Falcons just have a higher floor. But honestly, after looking at the matches today, I think this may actually be closer. So going into the predictions, so when we do the predictions after analyzing all these teams, I can't wait, because honestly, I think I'm going to change this from a 3-1 to a 3-2. I think Dignitas have shown how good they are, and then in the playoffs, playing against Oxygen, Dignitas have shown they have a lot higher floor. So in a nervous match like this, I definitely think Dignitas could actually take this to game 5. So I think Dignitas, they've earned enough for me to give them a couple more games against some teams. And for me, I also have them being able to beat Crew now. So that's a plus for them. And honestly, I could see them keeping it close against Liquid as well. So Dignitas, they've honestly gone up in my power rankings. That's what I should have done. I should have done initial power rankings for all these teams. But that's going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for showing up here to my stream. It's been a pleasure. Of course, we're now done with 6 teams. 6 out of the 16 teams are now done and over with. But thank you everybody who's shown up here to the thank you to everyone who's shown up. And yeah, remember tomorrow I have class early, so tomorrow's stream will be taking place at 6 p.m. EST. So make sure to show up for that. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your night. This is HVCLuc signing off. Peace.